It's time for Fresh Oil with singer-songwriter and pastor Keith Manley, a program designed to minister the gospel of God's grace and to bring fresh oil to the brokenhearted. And now, with today's program, Pastor Keith Manley.
Hello, friend. Welcome to Fresh Oil. My name is Pastor Keith Manley, and I'm so glad you joined me for the program today. It means a lot to me when I hear from you and people say that they enjoy the program. I so appreciate that. Today, we continue with the new series I've been doing called The Names God Won't Let Them Keep. Yesterday, we spent the full program with Abram. We looked at a man who carried a promise for 24 years with no visible evidence that it was going to arrive. We looked at his name, Abram, which meant exalted father, and the painful irony of carrying a name that spoke of fatherhood while having no children to show for it. And we looked at the extraordinary moment in Genesis 17 when God appeared to this 99-year-old man and changed his name to Abraham, Avraham in Hebrew, father of a multitude. And he renewed the covenant with a freshness that took Abraham's breath away. But I told you yesterday that I wanted you to notice something, and today we're going to slow it down and look at it carefully. When God appeared to Abraham in Genesis 17, when his name was still Abram, he changed two names, not one. There was a woman in the tent. She had been there through every year of waiting. She endured the same disappointments that Abraham endured. She heard the covenant promises second-handed. She had organized the household, managed all the servants, and moved from camp to camp as Abraham was on his journey to Canaan. She had grown from a middle-aged woman into old age, quietly carrying the weight of barrenness, while her husband carried the covenant. Her name was Sarai, and today her story is going to speak to every person who's ever wondered whether the promises of God were meant just for someone else or whether it was meant for you as well. Sarai, the name means my princess. And I want you to pay attention to that first word because it matters enormously to where we're going this morning. My princess. The possessive is built into the name. She belongs. She's defined in relation to someone else. And in the cultural context of the ancient Near East, this was not an insult. A woman called my princess was a woman of standing, of honor, a cherished position within her household. It was an affectionate, dignified name. But there's something subtly limiting about a name that can only be understood in relationship to another person. My princess. Whose? In relationship to whom? The name requires a frame. It requires someone else to give it meaning. And for most of Sarai's life, that is exactly how her story reads. She exists in the text in relationship to Abram. She is his wife. She accompanies his journey. She's mentioned whenever the narrative needs her. The episode in Egypt, the decision involving Hagar, but the covenant, the direct speech from God, that flowed to Abram. Now, I want to be careful here because this is not a criticism of Abram or of the structure of their marriage. Sarai loved her husband, and she was a woman of remarkable loyalty and strength. The New Testament in 1 Peter chapter 3 actually holds her up as a model of faithful, trusting womanhood. She's honored in both testaments. But I want you to feel what it must have been like to carry the personal weight that Sarai carried, to be barren in a culture where a woman's barrenness was not simply a private grief, it was a public statement. In the ancient world, the inability to produce children carried enormous social and spiritual weight. It raised questions that people sometimes asked out loud and always thought privately. Is she cursed? Has God withheld from her? Is there something wrong in her relationship with God? See, Sarai was 90 years old. She heard the covenant. She knew what God had said to her husband, but she never had a moment, not one single recorded moment in Genesis, the narrative up to chapter 17, where God turned to her and said, and you, I see you personally. The promise includes you directly. Your name is on this covenant. You see, Sarai thought God told Abram he's going to be a father, but he didn't speak to me. Maybe that's why she allowed Hagar to go in with her husband. 24 years of faithful partnership here during this waiting period with a man who carried a covenant. And then Genesis 17, verse 15, God says to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. Sarah. My princess was Sarai, but Sarah, the name I gave my firstborn daughter, means princess, simply and completely princess. God removed the possessive part of her name. Isn't that incredible? I want to stay here just for a minute. I don't want to rush past this because I believe it's one of the most quietly radical moments in the entire Abraham narrative. God removed the my. He didn't change the category of her name, just like Abraham's. He did not take her out of the framework of royalty and dignity that her name already expressed. He simply removed the relational qualifier. He took out her, my princess, and changed it to princess. In her own right, standing before heaven with a name that didn't require another person to give it meaning. Now, someone might say, is that really such a big deal, Keith? Well, I guarantee you, if God changed her name, it was a big deal. When God changes one word, pay attention, because every word God removes or adds is deliberate. She is not only his wife, she is a person I see individually, God was saying. She has a place in this covenant that's not simply a derivative of her husband's place. She is a participant in it. And that's an enormous statement. And God follows it immediately with something even more extraordinary. In verse 16, this is what it said. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her. Wow, did you get that? I will bless her. Then again, I will bless her. God repeats the blessing of Sarah twice in one sentence, as if he wants to make absolutely sure there's no ambiguity about his blessing and who it's aimed at. And then God goes on to say, she shall become nations, and kings of peoples shall come from her. Not just from Abraham, not just through Sarah as a passive biological instrument of Abraham's promise. No, but from her. Kings of peoples shall come from her. Now, this is the first time in the entire Abraham cycle that God directly and personally assigns the fruitfulness to Sarah. Not to Abraham through Sarah, not to the household, but to Sarah. She's going to be a mother of nations, a mother whom royal lines will emerge from her. And for 24 years, she had been living under a covenant, receiving secondhand information. And this is the moment. This is one extraordinary moment in Genesis 17 where God turns the full weight of the promise and he aims it directly at Sarah. I see you. I've always seen you. The promise was never only for your husband. The promise was always for you. And I want to speak to someone listening today. I have a sense that there may be more than one of you. You may have spent years, maybe many years, living as in someone else's calling. You're the spouse of one who is visibly called. You're the one who holds things together behind the scenes, who someone else stands in the spotlight of what God is doing, but you're the person in the supporting role of a ministry, a mission, maybe just your family. And it seems to center on someone else other than you. And the quiet question you rarely say out loud because it almost feels like you're being disloyal is this: does God see me? Not us, not our household, not the ministry. Does God see me? Sarah's story answers that question. God renamed her separately. God gave her a promise separately. He didn't say to Abraham, and tell your wife Sarah I said hello, and that she's a part of this too. No, God spoke to her, her name, her blessing, her fruitfulness. My friend, God sees you separately. He has words for you that are not simply the overflow of those around you. Don't leave this message today without receiving that into your heart. Now, the story does not unfold in a perfectly tidy way after this, and I think sometimes the messy parts are actually the more encouraging parts than the tidy parts would be. When Abraham hears the promise that Sarah at 99 years old will bear a son, the Bible tells us in Genesis 17:17 that Abraham fell on his face and laughed. And he said this in his heart: shall a child be born to a man who's 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And then in Genesis 18, 3 visitors come to Abraham's tent, and they announce again that Sarah will have a son. And Sarah, listening from inside the tent, laughs within herself. And she says, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? She laughed in the moment of promise. And the Lord hears it, and he asks Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? He confronts the moment of doubt with a rhetorical question. He says this, is anything too hard for the Lord? I love that exchange. Not because the doubt is admirable, but because of what God does not do. He confronts the laughter. He names it. He does not pretend it didn't happen, but he doesn't revoke the promise because of the laugh. He doesn't say, well, if you're going to laugh, we'll find someone else who won't laugh. No, he says, in fact, I heard it. I know, but we're still going forward. And that's the grace of God, friend. He doesn't require perfect faith to fulfill his promises. He requires a faith that is honest with itself, honest with God, and willing to keep going, even in the moments where the magnitude of the promise and the reality of what you see looks like two different things. And then Genesis 21, the fulfillment. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. Wow. And what did they name him? God named him Isaac, which means laughter. Itzhak in the Hebrew. And Sarah speaks in Genesis 21:6. She says, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. The same woman, the same laughter, but now it's the laughter of joy instead of the laughter of disbelief. Now, I'm going to give you 3 quick teaching points today to anchor this program. The first one, God has a direct word for you, not merely a reflective word through someone else. See, community is essential. We're made to live in it. We receive from one another. Marriage is wonderful, and we receive from each other. But listen, God's relationship with you is not just through your husband or through your wife. We carry each other's words and prayers and encouragement. But listen, God has a direct word for you and a direct plan for your life. And so it was with Sarai. God changed her name to Sarah, and God gave her the promised son. Now, don't stop seeking your own encounter with God just because you've been blessed by someone else's. Here's the second one. The removal of the possessive was liberation, not diminishment. God took out of her name the word my, and he replaced it with just princess. Not my princess, but princess. And it wasn't a loss, it was a gift. He was freeing her identity from its dependence on a relational qualifier and establishing in her own right herself before him. He was saying, you don't need a possessive pronoun to have standing in this covenant. I see you, Sarai. I see you. And you're not simply the spouse of someone called. You are a person God has named and seen and addressed personally. Now here's my final teaching point. God redeems the laughter of our weakest moments. Sarah laughed in doubt, and God turned the doubt laughter into the name of the child who fulfilled the promise. Do you realize every time she called her son Isaac to come to dinner, she was saying, laughter, come to dinner. Laughter, take out the garbage. Laughter, you're such a blessing from God. If you've ever laughed in disbelief, if you've ever had your private tent moment of there is absolutely no way this can still happen, you're in good company. And God's not finished with you over that moment. He's going to give you something to laugh about that makes the old laughter look like a rough draft. Sarai became Sarah. My princess became simply princess. A woman defined by relationship became a woman defined by divine declaration. Tomorrow, Jacob is coming, and the river at Jabbok. I'm Keith Manley. Thank you for listening to Fresh Oil, Walking Grace.
Thanks for joining us today for Fresh Oil with Pastor Keith Manley. Fresh Oil is an outreach of Grace Family Church in Rockford, Illinois, and can be heard each weekday at this same time. You can reach us online at weneedgod.com. Until next time, remember, God's love for you is unconditional, and He makes His mercies new every morning.